Hello and welcome to IDDTalks here at ADA University. My name is Anastasia Lavrina and now I'm joined by a very distinguished guest from London, United Kingdom, Mr. Klaus Jurgens, who is the Director of Economyfirst Limited London. Warm welcome.
Thank you, Anastasia. Always a pleasure.
J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States of America, visited two countries in the South Caucasus, Armenia and Azerbaijan. They signed charter on strategic cooperation with Azerbaijan and nuclear deal with Armenia. Let me start with a basic question. What's your overall assessment of the Vice President visit to Armenia and Azerbaijan? How timely and significant was it?
Well, I think it was very significant, actually. First, of course, interesting that he went to both Armenia and your nation. I think from the Washington viewpoint, this made sense. And after the visit, actually, it made even more sense, because I think the American public, for the first time, began to realize that it's not only about Armenia and what Azerbaijan did in the past. No, it is finally coming to terms with that Armenia made mistakes as well, but now the time for peace has come. And I think Washington wants to be seen as a much bigger player in the Southern Caucasus, I think for two reasons. One, yes, they do understand how important the TRIPP corridor will actually be, basically from the Caspian Sea to Turkey and beyond. Secondly, of course, they want to curb Moscow's influence, because Russia will not be amused by what J.D. Vance actually had on the agenda. I'm not saying that they want to curb the influence completely. The German chancellor once said famously, there will never be a world without Russia, and I fully agree. So you have to deal with it diplomatically and not by war, ideally. So it was absolutely significant. Now, I think it's not only diplomacy and shaking hands. I think the economic dimension, not only but including the TRIPP corridor, is huge. It might be about investment. It might be about export and import. It might be about even nuclear technology. It might be about IT, what have you. And I think this opens the door, I once said, where business people go first, very often civil society will follow. Unfortunately, it doesn't always go the other way around. A couple of student exchange trips do not bring automatic peace, but they will benefit from peace. And if the trade community understands it, the politicians will follow. Now, I think two losers, some would say, we have to take Iran into the mix as well. Now, Iran, of course, is still slightly worried, if I'm not wrong, that the TRIPP corridor is basically passing through Armenian territory. Now, what's in it for Iran? I think it is 5 years ago in Brussels, or maybe even 6, there was a kind of publication from the side of the Azerbaijani government detailing a first map of the Sangazur corridor. And very interesting at the time, there was always a Georgian dimension, and there was even a Tehran dimension. How can Iran one day benefit from this corridor by a new link, by rebuilding existing links? So Armenia and Azerbaijan on Washington's cards, but we should not sideline Iran and Russia completely. We must give them something in return. And in particular, if we talk about our friends in Georgia, because they might be worried what is going to happen with us. Now, Armenia and Azerbaijan, very soon close friends. Iran, Russia, perhaps worried what and who takes care of us. Last point, if I may, when we talk about the Southern Caucasus, I think now there is a huge chance to set up a mini single market. You know, the European Union internal market, as flawed as it is, when it started, it followed successful peace in Western Europe. So the politicians came first this time, and then business came, and then civil society. A free market for people, for goods, for finance, and for services. Why not start Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan to bring free travel, free movement of goods, joint investment, and then attract foreign direct investment into the wider region? I think it's huge, but it was absolutely vital that Washington, unfortunately, yes, speaking now from an EU perspective or UK perspective too, I would love to see my European friends and politicians having been there first and doing exactly what J.D. Vance now did to actually help to promote peace and not pointing the fingers anymore. And Brussels is again waiting and looking here and looking there. But it's a fact of life. Donald Trump, President Trump, said he wants to make America great again. Again, with all the ups and downs, we talk about tariffs and what have you, and international politics, and yes, but he did broker peace between your nation and Armenia, despite long, many years of efforts from your side. But we have to take the fact into account. Now J.D. Vance came to build on that momentum. I think it's a positive development. And what I heard from your side and your country, I think you were not really disappointed that he came and what he said in public.
Absolutely. We could see the significant shift in the relations between Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the United States since the meeting held in last August in Washington between the President Ilham Aliyev, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, and the United States President Donald Trump. That time, two countries, Azerbaijan and the United States, also agreed to proceed further with let's say, development of the partnership, strategic partnership in various spheres. It's energy, it's economic, it's a political coordination. So what distinguishes this strategic partnership charter from previous bilateral agreements signed between the Washington and Baku?
Initially, it will, I think, be a political framework, but it is more than just playing to the gallery. Let me compare it with strategic partnerships, what some EU member states actually prefer with regards to the Republic of Turkey. And Turkey is not amused because what does a strategic partnership mean? As you say, does it have legally binding status? Only if it is written in law. So it will be a framework for future strategic partnerships. I made a little list. Think only about economy. Think about the Caspian Sea. Think about investment. But then think about the political dialogue. Strategic partnership for me is not only about trade. I mentioned this trade so often now. Now back to politics. Strategic partnership needs a high-level group of coordinators and high-level meetings on a regular basis, linked to various topics. And these meetings, perhaps even on cabinet level, administrative levels, high-ranking officials, they can then propose precise steps to their respective presidents. And I think it will take some time. But yes, it's a new type of cooperation, this strategic partnership. Now, how can it be filled with life? I think it will only be filled with life if the next 12 months something happens. If it's only on paper, yes, we have a strategic partnership and let's move on, I think nothing really will change. But if now both sides actually say, yes, what can be done, what should be done, and I think this high-level coordination group, or however it will be called, this could be the kind of springboard for a continuous strategic partnership, then building on this one for the entire Southern Caucasus. Why not? And this would bring us a little bit closer to my mimic single internal market, a strategic partnership involving the entire Southern Caucasus based on Baku, Washington. I think there's huge potential.
I guess you will agree with me that one of the key elements of this new type of cooperation is partnership in security and defense spheres. What is the strategic significance of the United States supplying patrol boats to Azerbaijan's Coast Guard in the Caspian Sea? How it may change the power balance in the region?
Yes, of course, the Caspian Sea is very vital. It borders not only Azerbaijan, it borders many countries. And once you have peace in the Caspian Sea, the threat which might be posed by other nations bypassing or passing through the Caspian Sea will basically be minimal, if not no longer existing. There was a time when you, if I'm not wrong, could actually take a ferry to Iran from Baku, but this is decades ago. Now, I always say don't alienate Iran automatically, but make sure that under no circumstances can there ever be any attacks, for example, towards your nation. Iran must see that America really this time talks the talk. I don't see President Trump actually that he wants to have boots on the ground. Of course not. The American public would not want that. The American public tries to make ends meet and bring a square meal on the table for their families. They don't want to get involved in another global war. So diplomacy is the key thing, but sometimes, you need deterrence. And deterrence, unfortunately, sometimes is based on weapons technology and surveillance technology and military technology. I think this is what they want to achieve actually in the Caspian Sea and supporting Azerbaijan in this matter. For me, it's more deterrence and peacekeeping, to be honest. I don't see it as aggressive.
Klaus, is it realistic to assume that the United States could partially replace Russia as Armenia's primary security partner?
Well, not only this topic, but J.D. Vance spoke differently about the genocide claims this time. Actually, some say he did not even want to mention it, even while he was on Armenian soil. Now, this is a game changer. And now the ball is in Russia's court. Russia must understand that there will always be Russia, but that the geopolitical situation has changed. It is no longer possible to actually tell Yerevan what to do, because the people in Armenia don't even buy into this anymore. They have exactly the same problems. Their economy is in a pretty bad shape. They want to see an up in the economy. And I think they're coming to the realization, even this can work with the support of Washington. What would Russia actually really worry about? I made 4 points. We have the military, the economy, we have nuclear, and then we have the drone discussion. This is what J.D. Vance actually spoke about while being in Armenia. Now, of course, Russia was listening to every word and reading between the lines. If previous investments in these sectors coming from Russia predominantly are now perhaps step by step first supplemented, maybe even one day substituted with American technology and investments, it's an entire new ballgame. It's the same like NATO expansion. This is the only thing that really worries me, when what Russia would perceive as perhaps half friendly, but not necessarily friendly nations get closer and closer and closer to Russian territory. Think about NATO eastwards expansion. If you would be the Russian president, Anastasia, you would worry, and rightly so, what comes next? Will there be an invasion one day? Is my territory safe? Now, if Russia is going to lose, basically they lost Damascus. And everyone in the past always said Russia will always want to keep Damascus. It is its outpost in the Eastern Mediterranean. Now the situation in Syria has changed completely. Armenia, different situation. No civil war, of course, but Russia is watching it very closely. What would happen if this northeast expansion, so to speak, into Armenia, in the Southern Caucasus, from the side of Washington, leads to a fact that public sentiment in Armenia gradually but steadfast moves away from accepting Moscow as a guarantor power. I think the entire geopolitical situation is very volatile, is shifting. It must be treated very, very, very careful. There are still very nationalistic elements in Armenia as well. There are still small pockets in Armenia who actually do not agree with the peace process between your nation and Armenia. And this is something Russia, of course, is watching very carefully. Could this be a side entrance back to exert more power again in Armenia? Everyone has to treat very, very carefully, most of all Washington. But no, I'm not disappointed by J.D. Vance's visit, and public reaction and politicians' reactions in both countries, I think they are rather optimistic, bar the nationalistic movement in Armenia, which I've just mentioned.
Klaus, and what are the strategic implications of the nuclear deal signed between Armenia and the United States?
Of course, Russia has for quite a long time used nuclear power as a soft form of diplomacy. by investing into nuclear power plants in third countries, by being shown as the good guy, helping to improve the supply of energy in countries which not necessarily had nuclear energy. Think about Rosatom and others. Now, of course, this will be a huge dent into Russia's own energy market, global scale expansion plans. Yes, but competition can only be good if the market is huge. Just last night, I read the amount of energy delivered from Azerbaijan to Armenia. It is still minimalistic, is it not? There's huge scope, and the market is huge. Why not again come to a situation where the Russian energy dimension, including nuclear, is not completely wiped out, but that competition is allowed, that if America so wishes and Armenia so decides, then let them do it. It has to be safe, it has to be affordable, and it has to actually, literally speaking, empower the Armenian people to be better in the sense of the economy. But yes, this, I think, besides the drones, let us put the drone question aside for a little bit, and general the economy. I think the nuclear energy dimension is what initially worries Moscow the most, because if Washington succeeds in convincing the Armenians, hey, we are as good or even better, then of course Russia has a problem.
Well, Klaus, thank you. Thank you so much for joining IDDTalks today.
Pleasure. Thank you.